Hi everyone, welcome to this presentation. This time we'll be talking about the different Greeks and the wars that they were a part of, as well as the formation of the Delian League. So be sure, as we go through this, to be filling out your notes, and if you have any questions, make sure to put them into the interactive guide. So, for about 100 years, the Greeks fought several different wars. And it really helped to shape and influence the way in which they became different city-states became empires. Um, Two of the more prominent ones were fought against the powerful Persian Empire, which was to the east. I'll show you a map in just a moment. And then later on, a civil war broke out amongst the different city-states of Greece, and we'll talk about how it got there and things like that. So, why did the Persians invade Greece? At about 519 BC, the Persians had conquered a group of people living in Asia Minor, which is right over here, called the Ionian Greeks, lived over here in Ionia. And so here's Greece over here, as you can see. And so in 499, about 30 years later, the Ionian Greeks, they asked for help from the mainland Greeks, saying, listen, we need help to rebel and push against these Persians. We don't want them ruling us anymore, etc. Athens agreed. And as you learned about last time, they have a very strong navy, so they were able to send their warships to help them. Unfortunately, at this point, they were not strong enough to stop this very, very, very powerful Persian Empire, and they could not defeat the Persian army. So they went back, and those who died died, unfortunately, and then the rest of them just went back. And so, despite this, the Persian king Darius was extremely angry at the Greeks, and as you can probably imagine, he would want to take revenge. So, only a few years later, in 490 BC, Darius sent about 600 ships and thousands of soldiers to come and invade Greece over here because he wanted to punish the Athenians for helping the rebels. And so they landed in Marathon, which is over here, north of Athens. And the Persians greatly outnumbered the Greeks. But the Persians were pretty amazed by what they had seen coming up against them. That the Athenian force was small but pretty mighty, and they had strong will. They only had foot soldiers. They didn't have any horses or archers or anything the way that the Persians did. And despite this, they really were still able to fight back pretty confidently and strongly against the Persian Empire. After only a few days, the Persians decided to attack Athens by sea, so they would come around this way, attack them here, and which was probably the biggest mistake that they made, considering what we know about how strong the Athenian navy is. And so, while they were beginning to load their ships in Marathon and beginning to make their way around here, the Athenians attacked them and defeated them, and the Persians were forced to retreat. And so, in this first Persian War, we see Athens, dealing a pretty decisive blow here to the Persian Empire. Let's talk about Marathon for a moment. The Greeks had sent their fastest runner, um, Philippides, to carry home news of the victory. And he sprinted 26.2 miles, which should sound familiar to you, considering that's the same distance as a marathon, from the battle to the city-state of Athens. And he arrived and said, "Rejoice, we conquer," etc. And then he died of exhaustion. And so the race marathon, as we know it today, was named after Philippides, who had run what we now know as a marathon to get home to tell Athens of this great victory that they had had. So let's talk about Thermopylae. The Greek ruler Themistocles knew this was only going to be a temporary victory. He knew that the Persians were going to come back even stronger and want to fight back and defeat them, etc. So he really encouraged the Athenians to continue to build their fleet and prepare themselves for more battle, and that's exactly what they had done. In 480, so not even 10 years or so later, um, Darius' son Xerxes sent a larger force to conquer Greece. This time, once and for all out, all the marbles on the table, send him there. He had 200,000 soldiers and nearly 1,000 ships. And then by this time, Athens was able to convince Sparta to join them in battle. So at this point, we see Athens and Sparta working together. So about 20 different Greek city-states joined together to fight these Persian invaders. Sparta had taken charge of the army, mostly because they had the most experience and they were the strongest, while the Athens had taken more control over the navy. The Persian army really didn't have that much trouble as it moved its way through northern Greece, but it came to a narrow mountain pass called Thermopylae. and there were 7,000 Greeks waiting with the Persians. And those 7,000 Greeks were able to hold off and stop this army from moving forward. Um, Someone had betrayed the Greek army and led some Persians behind them, and forcing the Spartan soldiers to retreat to their ships because the Persians continued to move forward. So someone within um, the Greek army had betrayed them. So at Thermopylae, and this is the scene from the movie 300, which is what this is based on. A small Spartan force of about 300 men, commanded by King Leonidas, had to guard the mountain pass of Thermopylae. They were able to hold out pretty heroically against this enormous Persian front for 3 whole days. 300 men for probably thousands of Persians for 3 whole days. Again, they were also, so the part of this is that the same story, is that they were betrayed by someone who had told the Persians how to get behind the army, and they were defeated. But they were able to win lots of time for the rest of the Greeks to get reinforcements and to help fight. So Thermopylae was a great moment, despite it being a loss for the Greeks, a great moment in history. Then we have Salamis. So as they made their way from Thermopylae and they made their way down, Persians continued to march south, and they went to destroy the city of Athens, and that happened pretty quickly. Why? Because the Athenians had already moved over to Salamis, recognizing what was going to happen. They already moved over to Salamis, which is a small nearby island, and more than 800 Persian ships had attacked the Athenian navy near the island. The large Persian ships could not maneuver in the water the way that the Athenian navy was able to use their trireme to be able to make more of maneuverable passes. And so Greek ships were able to just pick them off one by one because it was very easy for them to get stuck in these short, narrow passages in the water. So the results of these two Persian wars, the Greek sense of uniqueness was increased. This idea that the Greeks had a particular way of living with these multiple city-states, all having different government structures and things like that, became more of a reality versus more of just an idea of something that wasn't really going to last. Athens had really emerged as the most powerful city-state during this time, and they decided to organize what became known as the Delian League, which was an alliance of all of these Greek city-states together, that if one should be attacked, we all should be there to back them up. They used this league really more to assert power and build their Athenian empire. So while in theory it could be meant to find equality amongst city-states, Athens chose to make it, once you were an ally with us, we're going to then take control over you. The treasury was moved to Athens and forced people to stay in the league against their will. When people realized what was happening, they didn't want to be part of it anymore and decided that they would want to leave. But Athens, of course, wasn't going to allow that. Let's talk about in the age of Pericles. He was a wise leader and very skillful. Brought about a golden age within Athens, from about 460 to 429. This is often called the age of Pericles. He believed that male citizens should take part in government regardless of wealth or social class. He paid his men who worked in public office, enabled the poor to serve in government. The assembly met several times a month, 6,000 members came to vote. This was really more of a direct democracy, where citizens took part in the day-to-day affairs of the government versus what we see as more of a representative government, representative democracy, where we vote and the people are supposed to then represent our interests. And so this was a really interesting way of building a government that people really supported. He was able to build the Acropolis, and he turned Athens into the cultural center of Greece. So after it was destroyed during that Second Persian War, Pericles was able to rebuild Athens and really make it into a hub of culture and strength within Greece. However, most people, as you imagine, especially Sparta, weren't too happy with the Athenian domination. They resented it, and so the Greeks began to split into rival camps. Sparta, as a way to counter the Delian League, came up with what was known as the Peloponnesian League. So we have the Delian League and the Peloponnesian League. The Delian League was Athens and whoever was still faithful to Athens, and the Peloponnesian League was Sparta and whoever was faithful to them. Sparta encouraged an oligarchy where government was run more by business and small groups of people in these Peloponnesian states, while Athens continued to support democracy. And after time, as they continued to butt heads and the tempers continued to flare, a 27-year war broke out in 431 BC, which engulfed really into all of Greece, as you might imagine, considering all these different city-states were involved in this process. This became known as the Peloponnesian War, where Athens was really facing a pretty serious geographic disadvantage from the start. Why? Because Sparta was inland, and as you know, Sparta has the great army, Athens has the great navy. But if there's no water to be able to use your navy on, then there was no then their navy was no good for them to use. Sparta invaded Athens. Pericles allowed people from the countryside to move inside the city for reinforcement, but there was overcrowding in the city, and there was plague and disease, which killed more people than perhaps Sparta had even killed. A lot of internal struggles were undermining the democratic government. Why? People had different ideas of how to stop Sparta. People weren't all agreeing on the same ways. Sparta even was able to ally with an old enemy of theirs in Persia against the Delian League. Of course, Persia, had no problem joining, considering what Athens had done to them in previous years. And then finally, in 404 BC, with the help of the Persian navy, the Spartans captured Athens and stripped it of its entire fleet and the empire that it had once built. So the aftermath of this, Peloponnesian War ended Athenian greatness in Greece. The Athenian democratic government really suffered because corruption, selfish interests really replaced order and equality amongst the people. There was continued fighting that really continued to disrupt Greece throughout this time. Sparta itself had taken some serious defeats at the hands of another city-state in Thebes. And Greece was left pretty vulnerable to invasion, considering there was no unification happening here. There was no cultural development. The civilization really wasn't advancing, and the empire that once was broken down back into more devolved states of city-states. And so we see greater issues happening here amongst these Greek city-states. Just as a quick point of where we're moving to next, we'll see in 338 BC, King Philip II of Macedonia led his army from the north and conquered Greece. So as we say, how vulnerable it was, well, not too much longer later, we see King Philip II of Macedonia. And after he died, his son went on to conquer the entire Greek world, and his name is Alexander the Great. So be sure to be filling in these notes. Remember, you don't need every single point. You just need to get some of the basics and the broader concepts here to understand how the empires were able to develop and what influenced it. So make sure you let me know if you have any questions, and I look forward to talking about this when we meet next. Take care.